Welcome back to the Deep Dive. This is where we take the complexity of your research, your articles, your notes, and distill them into actionable, crystal clear knowledge.
It's good to be here.
Today, we are plunging into a topic that is, well, let's be honest, it's universally dreaded. Yet it's absolutely essential for any kind of professional growth.
Mastering the stage.
Exactly. We are talking about becoming a confident, engaging presenter.
And we're looking at it through a really specific and I think really tough lens, the unique pressure people face when they're delivering content in a language that isn't their mother tongue.
Right, specifically English in this case. The emotional weight of public speaking is already huge.
It's immense. You shared some research with us that really quantified this, and the finding was it was just staggering.
It really was. In a recent study, public speaking was voted the scariest thing people could imagine.
And it ranked above some pretty serious contenders.
It ranked above death and spiders.
Above death. Let that sink in for a second.
Above death? I mean, if that's the baseline fear we're starting with, especially when you add language confidence into the mix, it's just an incredible hurdle.
It really is. If the starting point is, deeper anxiety than confronting your own mortality, then we need strategies that are more than just feel-good platitudes.
We need genuinely transformative, experience-based tools. And the source material you provided for this deep dive, it comes from a professional who speaks and teaches English extensively.
And someone who admits they initially despised presenting, hated it, but learned how to shift that dread into something they actually enjoy.
And that transformation is really our mission today, isn't it?
It is. We're going to synthesize 7 really practical, tested strategies. These tips, they go beyond the usual tired advice, and they target the specific issues of accent, pacing, how you prepare, and even your nonverbal communication.
The goal is to provide you, the listener, with a robust roadmap to confidence, turning presentation day from something you dread into a high-impact opportunity.
Exactly. But before we jump into those 7 core strategies, I think we need to quickly touch on the context of the source material itself.
Right, the initial part of the video, it talks about a pretty serious, intensive language learning environment.
And while we're not here to discuss, promotional details or anything like that, the philosophy behind it is crucial for our deep dive.
You're talking about the language marathon.
I am. The source material emphasizes that genuine improvement, whether it's in language skills or public speaking, it demands a significant commitment.
And the example they use is this 90-day language program.
Right. It requires this intense daily class completion. And like you said, we don't need the specific pricing or deadlines, but we do need to absorb that frame of mind.
Absolutely. When you look at the requirements for something like that, the idea of taking 90 classes in 90 days, or even the half marathon option, it sets an extremely high bar for engagement.
It does. It basically says, look, if you want real results, you have to commit intensely and consistently.
And that connects directly to mastering the stage, doesn't it?
100%. So many people hope that, reading a quick article or watching one video will just magically solve their presentation anxiety.
But the underlying confidence you need to speak publicly, especially in a second language, it requires that exact same level of commitment.
Exactly. The source is demonstrating that to overcome a really profound fear, you need consistent, daily, high-quality practice with qualified instruction.
So if you're going to stand up and present complex material flawlessly, even for just 15 minutes,
that performance is underpinned by hours and hours of dedication. That's the key takeaway here.
These 7 tips we're about to discuss, they aren't magic fixes.
Not at all. They are tools that maximize the return on serious time and effort. You can't just wish the fear away. You actually have to put in the work.
And the presenter's own journey seems to reflect that. They said they didn't stop hating presentations overnight.
No, they applied rigorous, committed, intentional strategies. So, as we dive into the tips, I think it's important for you to keep that high commitment mindset in the back of your mind. We're talking about transforming a skill, and that takes a marathon effort, not a casual sprint.
Okay, that's a perfect setup. Let's start with 2 tips that immediately tackle the biggest mental hurdles around language proficiency. Tip number 1 is a real game changer for anyone speaking non-natively.
It is. The tip is focus on pronunciation, not accent. In other words, forget your accent.
This feels like a huge psychological reset.
It's critical. Most non-native speakers, they feel this immense pressure to sound like a specific, often idealized native speaker. They want to completely eradicate their accent.
But the source argues that an accent isn't a defect.
Far from it. It's part of your cultural identity, your rhythm, your personal history. Trying to mask it is just, it's exhausting. and often it's futile.
So if we shouldn't worry about the accent, what exactly should we be worrying about?
Pronunciation, this is a purely mechanical thing.
Okay, break that down for us. What's the real difference?
Pronunciation is all about phonemes, the smallest units of sound that differentiate meaning in the language. For instance, the difference between the ol sound in light and the or sound in right. That's a phonemic distinction.
So the goal isn't to sound like someone else. It's just to make sure the audience understands the specific necessary sounds for the content.
Exactly. It's about clarity.
That distinction is really powerful. Can you give us another example of a common struggle area in English phonemes that kind of highlights this need for clarity over assimilation?
Sure. A classic one is the sound in English, the one you make by placing your tongue between your teeth, like in think or through.
Right. A lot of languages just don't have that sound.
They don't. So speakers will often substitute it with an S or an F or a D. So if you say free instead of three, the audience has to do a quick mental translation.
And that increases their cognitive load. They're working harder.
Precisely. Improving your pronunciation means focusing on articulating the thin, clearly, not trying to sound like you're from a specific town in the UK or the US.
And the most actionable tool tied to improving pronunciation, according to the presenter, is maybe the hardest one to implement when you're nervous.
Oh, absolutely. Slow down.
Just slow down.
The presenter states it emphatically. The best presentations are the slower ones. When we get nervous, our instinct is to speed up, which makes our articulation sloppy and makes our natural accent patterns harder for the audience to decipher.
And slowing down, particularly at the start, is vital for the audience. Why is that?
Well, because every single speaker, including native speakers, has an accent. We all have a specific cadence. When you start your presentation, the audience needs a little grace period.
Like a warm-up for their ears.
That's a great way to put it. They need maybe 2 to 3 minutes to adapt their ear to your specific speech patterns. If you rush through the beginning, they spend those vital minutes just trying to decode the sounds, and they completely miss your opening points.
So by slowing down, you're making the communication instantly more digestible. It's actually a sign of respect for the audience's processing time.
It is. And that brings us to the danger of trying to fake an accent or putting on what the source calls a fake posh voice.
Right, that seems like the opposite of what we're talking about, an attempt at assimilation.
And it backfires profoundly. The source suggests that trying to mask your natural accent or adopting one you're not comfortable with, it just comes across as deeply insecure. Or worse, inauthentic.
And audiences are incredibly sensitive to that, aren't they?
They are. They pick up on those nonverbal cues instantly. If a speaker appears fake or linguistically insecure, the audience's trust just evaporates.
So you're prioritizing a minor adjustment, your accent, over a major presentation imperative, which is credibility.
Exactly. The presenter is very clear on this. Unless you are an actor who literally needs to embody different roles for a living, don't waste your precious rehearsal time trying to eliminate your accent. Focus on clarity.
That focus on confidence and clarity leads us directly into tip 3, which the source calls a highly controversial but hugely impactful piece of advice.
Yes. Reconsidering the apology.
This targets that common reflex, that knee-jerk reaction so many non-native speakers have when starting a presentation in English.
The source observes that something like 9 out of 10 people begin by saying, "Sorry for my English."
And on the surface, it seems like a polite gesture, right? A way to manage expectations and maybe get the audience on your side.
It seems like it, but the source argues the psychological cost is catastrophic.
Why is that?
Because by apologizing, you are immediately positioning yourself as deficient. You're basically asking the audience to judge you on your weakest link, your language ability, rather than your expertise in the content.
You're signaling insecurity from the very first sentence. You're effectively saying, please be patient with me because I'm not good enough.
Precisely. You make yourself seem small and unconfident, and you cede control of the stage instantly. You lose all your authority before you've even started your first slide.
So the key is to address the linguistic situation without begging for forgiveness.
You have to. The recommendation is radical but simple. Stop apologizing altogether.
But what if a presenter feels they have to acknowledge that English isn't their first language? How can they frame it without diminishing themselves? What's the empowered alternative?
It has to be a confident declaration that maintains ownership. The source suggests a proactive statement like, "English isn't my first language, but I'm going to try my best here."
That's better, but I feel like we could even improve on that.
We can. You could adopt a real stance of strength, something like, my expertise is in data science, and while I may not be a native English speaker, my dedication is to conveying this content to you as clearly as possible.
I really like that reframing. It completely shifts the tone from defense to declaration.
It does. It says, I know what I'm talking about, and I'm making the effort to communicate it to you. It's unapologetic.
It acknowledges reality, but frames it as a challenge you've already overcome just by being there.
And that demonstrates inherent confidence and control. When you present that way, the audience subconsciously respects the effort. They're far more willing to engage and work with you rather than spending their time evaluating your grammar.
You're establishing a contract where content, not conjugation, is the priority.
And that simple change in your introductory phrasing just sets the entire stage for success.
Okay, let's talk about one of the most powerful, yet frankly terrifying elements of a presentation. Silence. We've already covered the need to slow down, but tip 2 takes this a step further.
Yes. Use pauses to your advantage. This turns slowing down from a defensive necessity into an offensive weapon.
Silence is terrifying because we associate it with a breakdown, don't we? We think the audience is just waiting for us to recover from a mistake.
That's the fear. But the best speakers know that silence is a tool. We've already identified the first benefit, which is audience processing time.
And this is where that great, relatable anecdote from the source material comes in. The story about shouting a question to someone who's downstairs.
Yes, it's a perfect illustration of what we call cognitive processing lag. The example is, you shout a complex question down the stairs, and then, because you're impatient, you immediately repeat it.
And the person downstairs, what do they say?
They automatically reply, what?
Right. Every time.
And they're not asking for a repeat because they didn't hear you. They're asking because they haven't had time to process the complex information you just threw at them.
But the insight from the source is that if the speaker just waits, if they pause for just 3 or 4 seconds before repeating,
the listener often processes the information in that gap and answers correctly. No repeat needed.
applying this to an audience is crucial.
Absolutely. Especially when you're presenting complex data or when you're delivering a really high-impact statement. The audience needs those few seconds for the message to land, for their brains to organize the facts.
Or even just for them to fully adapt to your pronunciation, which goes back to tip 1.
Exactly. A pause is a gift of cognitive space that you give to your listener. Without it, you're just burying your own message under a pile of unprocessed information.
So pauses are essential for the audience, but they're also profoundly beneficial for the speaker, which leads to benefit 2. Speaker recovery time.
This is absolutely vital. When we're nervous or speaking in a non-native language, it's easy for our tongue to get in a twist, as the source puts it, or we make a factual mistake.
And the instinctive reaction is panic.
Panic, followed by rushing, which just accelerates the rate of error.
So the intelligent, confident move is the complete opposite. It's to pause.
Precisely. A deliberate, controlled pause of maybe 3 seconds gives you, the speaker, vital recovery time. It allows you to breathe, to mentally reread your notes, to plan the next perfect sentence, and to reset your cadence.
So when you resume speaking, you're back in control. That small moment of silence makes the previous stumble seem utterly minor.
It does. And what I find most fascinating about this tip is how experienced speakers use pauses, not just defensively, but offensively. They manipulate the silence so the audience perceives it as intentional emphasis.
That's what the source calls the highest level of confidence theater.
It is. A sophisticated speaker can pause dramatically after a key piece of data. The audience interprets this as, wow, that number is so important, the speaker wants me to reflect on it.
Meanwhile, the speaker might actually be quickly glancing at their next bullet point.
Or checking the time, or taking a needed sip of water. They could be skimming the audience, as the source says, checking for body language or understanding. The key is that the pause has to look intentional and controlled, never panicked.
And that just takes practice.
It does. Practice integrating strategic silence into your rehearsal routine, which we'll cover next. Don't let silence be something that happens to you. Make it something you do deliberately for rhetorical effect and personal recovery.
That brings us to our next section, which is all about preparation methodology. Because confidence comes from preparation, but the key insight here is that not all practice is created equal.
That's right. And tip 4 addresses a really crucial nuance. Practice, but don't learn, which basically means don't memorize. This is all about the quality of your practice, ensuring your delivery is alive, not robotic.
The presenter highlights a truth we all recognize, right?
Yeah.
You can instantly tell when someone is just reciting a memorized text.
Oh, instantly. There's a specific kind of deadness to the delivery, a lack of connection.
So what are the qualities of a presentation that feels properly practiced, as opposed to just memorized?
A practiced presentation is described as organic, genuine, flowing, and inherently trustworthy. The speaker sounds like they're discussing their expertise off the cuff, confidently, even if they've run through the material dozens of times. They're flexible.
And conversely, the memorized or learned presentation is rigid.
It's stagnant, sterile, and just plain uninteresting. When a presenter is locked into a memorized script, if they lose one key word, the entire structure can collapse. They often just freeze.
And they can't deviate, can they? They can't genuinely interact with an audience question because it throws them off their script.
Exactly. That rigidity destroys the connection.
So how do we practice in a way that generates this organic, trustworthy flow and avoids that memorization trap?
The key is variance. The aim is to rehearse multiple times so that the content comes out slightly differently each time. You're memorizing the concepts and the structure, not the specific wording.
Can you give us some concrete rehearsal strategies that encourage that kind of variance?
Sure. One great strategy is to start by practicing just your transitions repeatedly. The content in the middle of a section is usually fine, but the jumps between sections are where most people stumble.
Okay, that makes sense. What else?
Practice starting your presentation from the middle, or even from the end. If you only ever rehearse from the beginning, your brain locks onto that one sequence. If you get thrown off, you have no other reference point.
So by practicing a variety of entry points, you prepare yourself for a multitude of situations. You're solidifying the structure of the argument, not just the flow of the sentences.
Exactly. And one last thing. Always practice responses to obvious Q&A points. Rehearse the concepts you would use to defend your argument, rather than trying to script the perfect defense.
That sounds exhausting, but incredibly effective. It turns the entire presentation into a set of modular blocks that you can rearrange or deliver independently, rather than a single fragile chain.
And that builds the true confidence that comes from deep conceptual understanding. And that leads directly to the essential tool that supports this organic delivery. Tip 5.
Use cue cards to your advantage.
Yes, cue cards or speaker notes are absolutely non-negotiable, especially for mitigating stage fright.
The source is very clear on this. It says, those who go up without notes, hoping to wing it, risk standing there completely like a lemon.
Which is a great phrase. Frozen and unable to recover if you're caught off guard. Your notes are the safety net that allows for the risky, yet rewarding freedom of an organic delivery.
They're the anchor.
Exactly. But the format is everything. The source makes a strong point by referencing that poor university example we've all seen.
Oh, the presenter standing there with 2 A4 pages.
Containing the entire word-for-word speech. That's not presenting, that's just reading. And it undermines all the hard work we just talked about with practicing without memorizing.
It looks so unprofessional. It instantly signals a lack of real preparation.
It does. It signals that the speech was just written the night before and never actually internalized. Your cue cards must function purely as navigational tools.
We're talking tiny bullet points.
Tiny. Keywords, maybe a single data point or a transition phrase. They are used only to remind you where you are and to keep you on track.
So practically speaking, we're talking high contrast, large font bullet points. Do you have any other recommendations on the mechanics of using them effectively? Maybe color or numbering?
Definitely. Use a minimal number of cards, maybe numbered 1 to 5, so you don't get them out of order. Color coding is great. A red bullet for a major transition, a green one for a call to action.
And what about how you look at them?
Critically, practice looking at your card quickly, absorbing the information, and then looking back up at the audience before you speak. You never want to be talking while looking down at your notes.
Ah, that's a key distinction.
It's the difference between a presentation that flows and one that constantly pauses while you look down to read. It ensures the card is a prompt, not a crutch.
Okay, let's shift our focus to the nonverbal elements. Because before you even open your mouth, your body language is communicating confidence or fear to the audience.
It is. Tip 6 is all about controlling that physical presence. Think about your body.
If you're projecting insecurity physically, it doesn't matter how well rehearsed your script is. The audience will sense that dissonance.
They will. And the first step is establishing a grounded, confident stance. The source material has a great name for it.
The Supergirl stance. I love that. What are the practical components?
It's simple but powerful. Feet firmly planted, slightly apart shoulder width, or maybe a little more. Chest out, good posture, shoulders back.
It sounds stable.
It is. It projects authority and control. When you take the stage, if you have already decided on this physical posture, you prevent the nervous shuffling and weight shifting that is so common when anxiety hits.
And what about movement? So many presenters, particularly those new to the stage, feel like they need to be pacing constantly.
That pacing is almost always a nervous habit. The advice from the source is to avoid walking up and down unless you are extremely comfortable with the space.
Why is that?
It's distracting for the audience, and there's always the risk of tripping or getting tangled in a wire, which just instantly breaks your authority.
So what's the alternative? Controlled movement.
Exactly. Stay planted in your Supergirl stance, but use your hands and pivot from the waist to address different parts of the audience. This looks confident, expressive, and, most importantly, controlled.
It's the small, uncontrolled movements that are the worst betrayers of nervousness, and often we don't even realize we're doing them.
We call those tics. These are specific, repetitive fidgeting habits that just accelerate under pressure.
The source lists some common ones, right?
It does. Things like touching your hair, rubbing the back of your neck, itching your nose, fiddling with a pen, or that terrible habit of doing thumb things.
Doing thumb things.
You know, playing with your own fingers or manipulating pocket change. Little repetitive motions.
And why is identifying these tics beforehand so crucial?
Because if they're unconscious, they will override your confident delivery. If you know that you rub your nose when you're anxious, you can consciously prevent it. The goal is to gain conscious control.
So what can you do in the moment? Are there grounding techniques?
Yes. If you feel a tic starting, focus your mind on your feet firmly planted on the ground. Hold a clicker or a single note card firmly in one hand. This gives your hands a specific job and makes it harder to unconsciously start fidgeting.
So by naming your tics, you give yourself the power to snap out of it and maintain that controlled physical presence.
Exactly. And that brings us to our final tip, number 7. This one deals with attire, and it's arguably the most externally focused yet psychologically powerful tip of them all.
Dress to impress. This one is called controversial, especially in modern business environments where casual wear or the startup uniform is so common.
It is. But the core rule is simple and effective. The rule of one notch.
Okay, what is the rule of one notch?
You should always aim to dress one level above the predicted dress code for the audience or the venue.
So if the expected attire is smart casual,
You should be noticeably leaning toward the smart side. Maybe a tailored blazer and slacks instead of jeans and a polo shirt. If it's standard office wear, consider a full, well-fitted suit.
but isn't there a risk of alienating the audience by overshooting that one-notch rule, especially in fields like tech or design, where a stiff suit might signal you're out of touch?
That is the essential nuance we have to address here. The goal isn't necessarily to wear a formal three-piece suit if you're speaking at an informal tech conference in Silicon Valley.
Okay.
The goal is to look groomed and intentional. The rule of one notch up is a mechanism for achieving two things: looking professional and making yourself feel confident.
So if the audience is in t-shirts and jeans, your one notch up might be a clean, dark, high-quality t-shirt and perfectly tailored dark jeans or chinos, rather than a wrinkled hoodie.
Exactly. The effort is the key. It's always better to look slightly overdressed or overprepared than underdressed or scruffy.
When you look like you've made a conscious effort to respect the event.
It instantly boosts your perceived authority and, crucially, your own self-assurance. You feel ready for the challenge. You feel like you belong on that stage.
And the connection back to audience engagement is undeniable.
The source material is very direct about this. An audience is more likely to keep their eyes and their attention fixed on a speaker who looks professional and groomed.
Whereas if a presenter looks sloppy or gives the impression they weren't really meant to be there,
the audience's attention will naturally drift. Dressing well is a nonverbal way of demanding respect for the content you are about to deliver. It supports the entire structure of controlled body language and confident pacing we've discussed.
this has been a really extensive deep dive into transforming fear into powerful, effective communication, particularly when navigating a second language. Let's quickly recalibrate and summarize the 7 essential strategies we've covered.
Okay. We began with the psychological foundations. Tip 1, embracing your accent as part of your identity while rigorously improving your pronunciation for clarity.
Tip 2, weaponizing silence by using strategic pauses for both audience processing and your own recovery.
And tip 3, adopting that unapologetic, confident introductory phrasing instead of ceding control with an apology for your English.
Then we covered preparation methodology. Tip 4 was practicing without memorizing, focusing on concept variants to ensure your delivery is organic and trustworthy, not sterile recitation.
And tip 5, relying on tactical, minimal, bulleted cue cards as your navigational tools to avoid the trap of just reading a full script.
And finally, the visual projection of authority. Tip 6, controlling your physical presence by adopting that grounded Supergirl stance and proactively eliminating nervous tics.
And tip 7, dressing to impress. Always leaning one notch toward the professional side to enhance both your own confidence and the audience's engagement through intentional effort.
It's a comprehensive set of tools, all designed to chip away at that fear that we noted at the very beginning, the fear that ranks above death.
And that leads us back to that profound initial statistic. If public speaking is feared more than death, if the audience themselves are already experiencing amplified stress just by witnessing a presentation, what is your command of these tips, especially tip 2 on pauses and tip 6 on body language? What does that communicate to them?
If you're stable and slow and intentional, you're communicating competence. You're communicating clarity and calm.
Exactly. So here is the final provocative thought for you to consider. If mastering these techniques grants you the audience's undivided, focused attention, if you have effectively solved their cognitive processing lag and their nonverbal doubts about you, what responsibilities do you now have toward them to ensure your message is not only accurate, but ethically clear, persuasive, and truly worthy of the time and focus you have demanded?
In other words, the confidence you project should serve the content, not just your ego.
Precisely.
Take these principles, apply the Supergirl stance, ditch the apology, and see how quickly the dynamic in your next speaking engagement shifts. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into presentation mastery.